Marcus Thompson wiped the grease from his hands with an old rag, squinting under the harsh afternoon sun as he bent over the open hood of his 15-year-old Honda Civic. The car had been acting up for weeks, making strange noises that he couldn't afford to have a mechanic diagnose, with his 8-year-old daughter Emma waiting in the back seat, coloring in her worn notebook. Marcus felt the familiar weight of responsibility pressing down on his shoulders. The parking lot of the upscale shopping center wasn't exactly the ideal place for car repairs, but when your vehicle decides to break down, you don't get to choose the location. Marcus had been driving Emma home from her Saturday art class when the engine started making a grinding sound that couldn't be ignored. Now, with his sleeves rolled up and his work clothes already stained with oil, he was trying to figure out what was wrong with the timing belt. "Daddy, is the car going to be okay?" Emma asked through the open window, her voice carrying that mixture of curiosity and concern that only children possess. She had inherited her father's dark eyes and her mother's gentle smile, though her mother had been gone for 3 years now, leaving Marcus to navigate parenthood alone. "It'll be fine, sweetheart. Just give Daddy a few more minutes," Marcus replied, though he wasn't entirely sure himself. The timing belt looked worn, and replacing it would cost money he didn't have. His job at the electronics repair shop barely covered rent, groceries, and Emma's school expenses. Luxury car repairs weren't in the budget. As he worked, Marcus became aware of voices nearby. A group of well-dressed people had gathered around a gleaming red Ferrari, parked just 2 spaces away. The car was a masterpiece of engineering, all sleek lines and polished chrome, probably worth more than Marcus would make in 5 years. The owner, a tall man in an expensive suit, was speaking loudly into his phone while his companions admired the vehicle. "Yes, the quarterly reports look excellent," the man was saying, his voice carrying the confidence of someone accustomed to being heard. "We're looking at a 30% increase in profits this quarter alone." Marcus recognized the type. Immediately, a successful businessman who had probably never worried about whether he could afford to fix his car. The businessman, whose name was Richard Kellerman, ended his call and noticed Marcus struggling with his Honda. A smirk crossed his face as he observed the scene. Richard was the CEO of Kellerman Industries, a tech company that had made him incredibly wealthy by his 40th birthday. He was used to the finer things in life and had little patience for what he considered the struggles of people who hadn't achieved his level of success. "Look at that," Richard said to his companions, loud enough for Marcus to hear. "Some people just don't know when to give up on a lost cause." His friends chuckled, glancing over at Marcus, who was now lying partially under the car, trying to get a better look at the engine. Marcus felt his cheeks burn with embarrassment, but he continued working. He had dealt with people like this before, individuals who judged others based on their circumstances rather than their character. He thought about his daughter watching from the car and reminded himself that her opinion was the only one that truly mattered. "I mean, seriously," Richard continued, apparently enjoying himself. "That car is older than some of my employees. He's probably spent more on repairs than the thing is worth. Some people just don't understand basic economics." His voice carried across the parking lot, and other shoppers began to take notice of the commotion. Emma looked up from her coloring book, her young face showing confusion at the mean words she was hearing. "Daddy, why is that man being mean?" she asked innocently. Marcus slid out from under the car, his jaw clenched but his voice gentle when he spoke to his daughter. "Sometimes people say things they don't mean, sweetheart. We just focus on what we're doing." But inside, he felt the sting of Richard's words. It wasn't that he was ashamed of his circumstances. He worked hard and provided for his daughter the best he could. It was the casual cruelty, the way Richard seemed to take pleasure in putting others down. Richard wasn't finished. He walked closer to Marcus, his expensive shoes clicking on the asphalt. "You know, friend, there comes a time when you have to accept that some things aren't worth saving. Maybe it's time to consider public transportation." His companions laughed again, clearly enjoying the show their wealthy friend was putting on. Marcus stood up slowly, wiping his hands on his jeans. He was a quiet man by nature, not given to confrontation, but something in Richard's tone pushed him to respond. "This car gets my daughter and me where we need to go," he said simply. "That's worth saving to me." "Your daughter?" Richard glanced toward the Honda where Emma sat watching. His expression softened slightly, but not enough to change his attitude. Well, I suppose everyone has their priorities. Some of us prioritize success. He gestured toward his Ferrari with obvious pride. What Richard didn't know was that Marcus had a gift that had nothing to do with money or status. He had an intuitive understanding of mechanical systems that went far beyond his formal education. Growing up, he had spent countless hours in his grandfather's garage, learning not just how to fix things but how to truly understand how they worked. His grandfather had always said that Marcus had the touch, an ability to diagnose problems that stumped even experienced mechanics. As Marcus returned to his work, he noticed something about the Ferrari that made him pause. The way the engine was idling, barely perceptible to most people, suggested a problem that hadn't yet manifested in obvious symptoms. The timing was slightly off, and there was a subtle vibration that indicated an issue with the fuel injection system. It was the kind of problem that would seem minor at first, but could lead to catastrophic engine failure if not addressed. Marcus glanced at Richard, who was now posing for photos with his friends beside the Ferrari. He could say something, warn the man about what he had observed, but after the way he had been treated, Marcus decided to keep his observations to himself. Sometimes, he thought, people had to learn lessons the hard way. As he finally got his Honda running again, Marcus helped Emma gather her art supplies and buckled her into her booster seat. The car started smoothly now, the timing belt properly adjusted and the engine running better than it had in months. Emma smiled at him through the rearview mirror as they prepared to leave. "Good job, Daddy," she said proudly. "You fixed it all by yourself." Marcus smiled back at his daughter, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with money or status. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight he would read Emma a bedtime story and help her with her homework. And that was worth more than all the Ferraris in the world. The next morning arrived gray and drizzly, the kind of weather that made Monday mornings feel even more challenging than usual. Marcus was in his small kitchen, making breakfast for Emma before school when his phone started buzzing insistently on the counter. The caller ID showed a number he didn't recognize, but something made him answer it. "Hello, is this Marcus Thompson?" The voice on the other end was crisp, professional, with a slight Italian accent that Marcus couldn't quite place. "Yes, this is Marcus," he replied, stirring Emma's oatmeal while balancing the phone against his ear. "Can I help you?" "Mr. Thompson, my name is Antonio Rossi. I am the Regional Director for Ferrari North America. I received some very interesting information about you, and I would like to discuss a potential opportunity. Would you be available to meet with me today?" Marcus nearly dropped the wooden spoon he was holding. Ferrari? He glanced over at Emma, who was getting dressed for school, completely oblivious to the strange turn her father's morning was taking. "I think there might be some mistake," Marcus said carefully. "I don't own a Ferrari, and I'm not sure why Ferrari would want to meet with me." Antonio chuckled softly. "There is no mistake, Mr. Thompson. We have been made aware of your exceptional diagnostic abilities, particularly regarding high-performance engines. Our information suggests that you identified a serious problem with one of our vehicles yesterday, even though you were not asked to examine it. Is this correct?" Marcus felt his mind racing. How could Ferrari possibly know about yesterday's incident in the parking lot? He had observed the issues with Richard's car, but he hadn't told anyone about it. "Well, I did notice something, but I'm not sure how you would know about that. Mr. Thompson, Ferrari takes the performance and safety of our vehicles very seriously. When one of our cars experiences a catastrophic engine failure, we investigate thoroughly. Yesterday evening, a red Ferrari 488 GTB suffered complete engine failure on Highway 101. The owner, a Mr. Richard Kellerman, had to be towed to our authorized service center in the city." Marcus set down the spoon and sat heavily in his kitchen chair. Richard's Ferrari had broken down, exactly as Marcus had suspected it would. The subtle signs he had observed in the parking lot had been the early warnings of a much more serious problem. "Our lead technician, Maria Santos, is one of the most experienced Ferrari mechanics on the West Coast," Antonio continued. "When she examined Mr. Kellerman's vehicle, she found a complex fuel injection problem that had been developing for weeks, possibly months. The interesting part, Mr. Thompson, is that Mr. Kellerman mentioned that yesterday, while his car was parked at a shopping center, there was a man working on his own vehicle nearby. He described this man as appearing to study his Ferrari intently." Emma bounced into the kitchen, her backpack ready for school, completely unaware that her father's world was shifting around him. Marcus held up a finger to indicate he needed another moment on the phone. Mr. Kellerman was, shall we say, not particularly complimentary in his description of this individual. Antonio continued with obvious diplomacy. However, Maria's analysis suggests that anyone who could have identified this problem from external observation alone would possess extraordinary diagnostic skills. The type of skills that Ferrari has great interest in. Marcus felt a mixture of emotions, vindication, nervousness, and something that might have been hope. I appreciate the call, Mr. Rossi, but I'm not a trained Ferrari technician. I work at a small electronics repair shop. I just have some experience with engines. Mr. Thompson, Maria Santos has been working on high-performance vehicles for 25 years. She started as an apprentice at the Ferrari factory in Maranello, Italy. When she tells me that the problem with Mr. Kellerman's car was virtually impossible to detect without sophisticated diagnostic equipment, and yet someone identified it through simple observation, I pay attention. Emma tugged on Marcus's shirt. Daddy, we need to go, or I'll be late for school. Marcus nodded at his daughter and then spoke into the phone. Mr. Rossi, I need to take my daughter to school. Could we possibly discuss this later? Of course. But Mr. Thompson, I would very much like to meet with you today. Ferrari is always looking for exceptional talent, and we believe you might be exactly what we have been searching for. Would 10 a.m. work for you? I can meet you at our service center downtown. After hanging up, Marcus felt like he was living in someone else's life. He drove Emma to school in a daze, barely registering her cheerful chatter about her upcoming science project. When he dropped her off, she gave him an extra long hug. Have a good day at work, Daddy, she said, not knowing that her father might not be going to his usual job at all. Marcus arrived at the Ferrari service center 30 minutes early, partly because he was nervous and partly because he couldn't concentrate on anything else. The building was impressive, all glass and steel with the famous prancing horse logo prominently displayed. Inside, the atmosphere was like a shrine to automotive excellence, with gleaming Ferraris in various stages of service and repair. Antonio Rossi was exactly what Marcus had expected, impeccably dressed, confident, and carrying himself with the authority of someone who represented one of the world's most prestigious brands. He was accompanied by Maria Santos, a woman in her 50s with intelligent eyes and hands that showed the evidence of years working with precision machinery. Mr. Thompson, thank you for coming, Antonio said, extending his hand. This is Maria Santos, our lead technician. She has some questions for you about Mr. Kellerman's vehicle. Maria studied Marcus with the same intensity that he imagined she brought to diagnosing complex mechanical problems. Mr. Thompson, I need to understand exactly what you observed yesterday. The failure in Mr. Kellerman's car was caused by a combination of factors: a failing high-pressure fuel pump, a clogged fuel filter, and a timing issue in the injection system. These problems typically develop slowly and are nearly impossible to detect without removing engine components or using computerized diagnostic equipment. Marcus thought back to the previous day, remembering the subtle signs he had noticed. The engine idle wasn't perfectly smooth, he began slowly. There was a very slight irregular pattern, almost like a heartbeat with an occasional skip, and there was a vibration that seemed to come from the fuel system rather than the engine mounts. The exhaust note was also slightly off, not enough that most people would notice, but it suggested that the fuel mixture wasn't optimal. Maria exchanged a glance with Antonio. Mr. Thompson, what you just described would require most technicians to run multiple diagnostic tests to identify. You observed this just by looking and listening. I've always been good with mechanical things, Marcus said modestly. My grandfather taught me that every engine has its own voice. When something is wrong, the voice changes, even if it's just a whisper. Antonio leaned forward. Mr. Thompson, Ferrari is launching a new diagnostic training program. We are looking for individuals with exceptional natural ability to train as specialized technicians. The position comes with full Ferrari certification, a significant salary increase, and the opportunity to work with some of the most advanced automotive technology in the world. Marcus felt his heart racing. This was the kind of opportunity he had never dared to dream of. But reality crept in quickly. Mr. Rossi, I appreciate the offer, but I don't have the formal education or credentials for something like this. I barely finished high school, and I've never worked on anything more sophisticated than basic cars and electronics. Maria smiled for the first time since they had met. Mr. Thompson, I can teach someone the technical specifications of a Ferrari engine. I cannot teach someone to hear what you heard yesterday. Natural diagnostic ability like yours is extraordinarily rare. Everything else can be learned. The meeting continued for another hour, with Antonio and Maria explaining the program, the training process, and the opportunities for advancement within Ferrari's organization. By the time Marcus left the service center, he had a job offer that would transform not just his life but Emma's future as well. Marcus spent the rest of the day in a fog of disbelief and possibility. After leaving the Ferrari service center, he drove aimlessly through the city trying to process what had just happened. The job offer was real. Antonio had given him official Ferrari documentation outlining the position, salary, and benefits package. It was more money than Marcus had ever imagined making. Enough to move Emma to a better neighborhood, pay for her college education, and provide the stability he had always wanted to give her, but doubt gnawed at him. Was he really qualified for something like this? Could a high school graduate who learned mechanics in his grandfather's garage really work for one of the world's most prestigious automotive companies? The imposter syndrome that had haunted him throughout his life whispered that this was all some kind of mistake, that they would soon realize they had chosen the wrong person. He picked up Emma from school that afternoon, watching her face light up as she ran toward their old Honda. She bounced into the car with her usual enthusiasm, immediately launching into a detailed account of her day. "Daddy, guess what happened in science class today? Mrs. Rodriguez showed us how sound waves work, and it made me think about how you always know what's wrong with cars just by listening to them. She said that people who can hear things others can't are called acoustically gifted. That's you, Daddy." Marcus smiled at his daughter's excitement, but her words hit deeper than she could know. Maybe his abilities weren't just amateur luck. Maybe there was something genuinely special about the way he understood machines. That evening, after Emma had gone to bed, Marcus sat at his small kitchen table with the Ferrari documents spread out before him. The training program would last 6 months, during which he would receive full pay while learning everything from basic Ferrari engineering principles to advanced diagnostic techniques. Upon completion, he would become a certified Ferrari technician with opportunities for advancement throughout the company's global network. The financial implications were staggering. His new salary would be nearly 4 times what he currently made at the electronics repair shop. They could afford a real apartment instead of the cramped 2-bedroom they currently shared. Emma could take music lessons, art classes, maybe even learn a second language. The future that had always seemed just out of reach suddenly appeared within his grasp. His phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. The caller ID showed his current boss, Jerry Martinez, from the electronics repair shop. "Marcus, I heard something interesting today." Jerry's voice carried a mixture of curiosity and concern. "One of my customers mentioned seeing you at the Ferrari dealership downtown." "Everything okay with your car?" Marcus had always liked Jerry. The older man had given him a chance when other employers had passed him over, and he had been understanding about Marcus's need for flexibility as a single parent. This conversation was going to be difficult. "Jerry, I need to tell you something. Ferrari offered me a job today. A real opportunity to train as a certified technician." There was a long pause on the other end. "Marcus, that's incredible." "I mean, Ferrari? How did that happen?" Marcus explained the events of the previous day, from the encounter with Richard Kellerman to the phone call from Antonio Rossi. As he talked, he could hear the amazement in Jerry's voice, but also something else, the sound of a man realizing he was about to lose his most skilled employee. "You have to take it," Jerry said finally. "I'll miss having you here, and honestly, I don't know how I'll replace you. But this is the kind of opportunity that comes along once in a lifetime. Your daughter is lucky to have a father who can provide for her like this." The next morning, Marcus called Antonio Rossi to accept the position. The relief and excitement in Antonio's voice were unmistakable. "Excellent, Mr. Thompson. I will have Maria contact you with all the details about your training schedule. We would like you to start next Monday if that works for you." "There's just one thing," Marcus said hesitantly. "My daughter Emma. She's 8 years old and I'm a single parent. I need to make sure I can still be there for her school events, and if she gets sick—" "Mr. Thompson," Antonio interrupted gently, "Ferrari understands that talented people have families and responsibilities. We will work around your daughter's schedule. In fact, family balance is something we take very seriously. Many of our best technicians are parents, and we have found that people who care deeply about their children often cared deeply about their work as well. That afternoon, Marcus picked up Emma from school with news that would change both their lives. He had planned a careful speech about new opportunities and changes, but Emma's reaction caught him off guard. "You're going to work on Ferraris?" she said, her eyes growing wide. "Like the red car from yesterday? Daddy, that's so cool. You're going to be like a doctor but for super special cars." Her simple joy and pride in her father's achievement melted away Marcus's remaining doubts. This wasn't about him proving himself to people like Richard Kellerman. This was about building a better life for his daughter and using his gifts in a way that mattered. That weekend, they celebrated by visiting the Science Museum, something they had always wanted to do but couldn't afford. As they walked through the exhibits, Emma pointed out connections between what she was learning in school and what her father would be doing at his new job. "Look, Daddy," she said, standing in front of an exhibit about engine combustion. "This is like what happens inside car engines, right? You're going to understand all of this even better soon." Marcus watched his daughter's face bright with curiosity and pride and realized that his grandfather had been right all those years ago. Everyone did have a gift. Some people were just lucky enough to find a place where their gift was valued and appreciated. On Sunday evening, as he prepared for his first day at Ferrari, Marcus thought about Richard Kellerman. The man's cruel words had stung, but they had also set in motion a chain of events that would transform Marcus's life. Sometimes, he reflected, the people who try to tear you down end up being the very ones who push you toward something greater. He tucked Emma into bed that night, and she looked up at him with sleepy eyes. "Daddy, are you nervous about tomorrow?" "A little," he admitted. "But mostly I'm excited. And grateful." Grateful for what? Marcus thought about how to explain it to an 8-year-old. Grateful that sometimes when we do our best and treat people kindly, good things happen, even when we don't expect them. Emma smiled and closed her eyes. "I think your new job happened because you're really good at fixing things. And because you're the best daddy in the world." As Marcus turned off her bedroom light, he realized that Emma was right. The opportunity with Ferrari hadn't come because of luck or coincidence. It had come because he had spent years quietly developing his skills, taking care of his daughter, and maintaining his integrity even when people like Richard Kellerman tried to diminish him. Tomorrow would begin a new chapter in their lives, built on the foundation of hard work, natural talent, and the unbreakable bond between a father and his daughter. Marcus's first week at Ferrari passed in a whirlwind of technical manuals, sophisticated diagnostic equipment, and the intoxicating sound of perfectly tuned engines. The training facility was unlike anywhere he had ever worked. Pristine white floors, state-of-the-art tools, and an atmosphere that treated each Ferrari like a work of art, rather than just a machine. Maria Santos proved to be an exceptional teacher, patient with Marcus's questions, while challenging him to think beyond conventional diagnostic approaches. She had been skeptical at first. She had seen many promising technicians fail when faced with the complexity of Ferrari's engineering, but Marcus's intuitive understanding of mechanical systems impressed her daily. Most people learn to diagnose problems by following procedures, she explained during his third day, as they worked together on a 458 Italia with mysterious electrical issues. "You seem to understand the car's language first, then use the procedures to confirm what you already suspect." Marcus ran his hand along the engine bay, listening to the subtle sounds the car made even while turned off. Modern Ferraris were filled with electronic sensors and computer systems, but underneath all the technology, they were still mechanical beings with their own personalities. "This one's been sitting too long," he said quietly. "The electrical problems aren't really electrical. They're moisture-related. Someone hasn't been driving it regularly, and humidity has gotten into connections that should stay dry." Maria nodded approvingly. "That diagnosis would have taken our previous diagnostic approach hours to reach. You identified it in minutes." She made notes in Marcus's training file, documenting his progress for Antonio Rossi's weekly reviews. What Marcus didn't know was that word of his abilities was spreading throughout Ferrari's network faster than anyone had anticipated. Antonio had mentioned Marcus's story during a conference call with regional managers, and several other locations had expressed interest in observing his training progress. The young man who had been mocked for working on his old Honda was becoming something of a legend within Ferrari's technical community. On Friday afternoon of his first week, Antonio appeared in the training bay with an unexpected visitor. The man was tall, distinguished, with the kind of presence that suggested importance even before introductions were made. "Marcus," Antonio said with obvious excitement, "I would like you to meet Giuseppe Martinelli. He is Ferrari's chief technical director for North America." Marcus wiped his hands nervously and extended one to Mr. Martinelli, who studied him with the same intensity that Marcus brought to diagnosing engines. "Mr. Thompson, I have been following your progress with great interest," Martinelli said in accented English that carried the weight of decades in the automotive industry. "Maria tells me you have identified problems this week that would challenge technicians with years of Ferrari experience." "I've had excellent teachers," Marcus replied modestly. Glancing at Maria, who was watching the interaction with keen interest, Martinelli smiled. "Modesty is admirable, but false modesty serves no one. I have been sent here from our headquarters in Maranello to evaluate whether you might be suitable for our advanced diagnostic program. This is a very exclusive training opportunity. Only 12 technicians worldwide are selected each year." Marcus felt his heart rate increase. Advanced program? He was barely finishing his first week of basic training. "The program," Martinelli continued, "involves 3 months of intensive training at our facility in Italy, working directly with our master technicians on prototype vehicles and racing engines. Graduates become part of Ferrari's elite diagnostic team, working on our most advanced and valuable vehicles." The offer was staggering. But Marcus's first thought was of Emma. "Mr. Martinelli, I'm honored that you would consider me, but I have an 8-year-old daughter. I can't leave her for 3 months." Martinelli exchanged a glance with Antonio. "Mr. Thompson, Ferrari has recently implemented a new family support program. For selected candidates like yourself, we provide relocation assistance for family members. Your daughter would attend international school in Bologna, which offers excellent English language education. Many Ferrari families choose this option. Emma living in Italy, learning about different cultures, maybe picking up Italian the way children do so effortlessly." Marcus tried to imagine his daughter exploring ancient cities and eating authentic gelato, while he learned from the world's best automotive technicians. "I would need to discuss this with Emma," Marcus said carefully. "It would be a big change for her." "Of course," Martinelli replied. "Take the weekend to consider it. But Mr. Thompson, I want you to understand something. In my 30 years with Ferrari, I have personally recommended fewer than 20 individuals for this program. Your natural diagnostic abilities, combined with your work ethic and character, represent exactly what Ferrari values in our technical team." That evening, Marcus sat Emma down for what he knew would be one of the most important conversations of both their lives. He had ordered pizza, their traditional celebration meal, and spread out maps of Italy on their small kitchen table. "Emma, remember how I told you that sometimes amazing opportunities come when we least expect them?" She nodded, her eyes bright with curiosity as she examined the colorful maps. "Well, the people at Ferrari think I'm doing really good work. So good that they want to invite us to go to Italy for a few months so I can learn even more about fixing their special cars." Emma's reaction was immediate and enthusiastic. "Italy? Like where pizza comes from? And where they have those boats in Venice like in the pictures at school?" Marcus laughed despite his nervousness. "Yes, exactly like that. There would be a special school for you there, and we would live in a beautiful city called Bologna, but it would mean leaving everything here for a while." Emma considered this seriously, her 8-year-old mind working through the implications. "Would we come back?" "Absolutely. This would just be for a few months and then we would come home. But I would have learned so much that I could help Ferrari even more. And that means I could take even better care of you." She was quiet for several minutes, studying the maps and occasionally asking questions about Italian culture and geography. Finally, she looked up at her father with the kind of directness that only children possess. "Daddy, do you want to go?" The question caught Marcus off guard. He had been so focused on Emma's needs and feelings that he hadn't really examined his own desires. "Yes," he said honestly. "I think it would be the most incredible learning experience I could ever have." "But only if you're comfortable with it," Emma grinned. "Then we should go. Besides, I've never been on an airplane before, and Mrs. Rodriguez says that traveling makes people smarter because they learn about different ways of living." That weekend, they spent hours researching Italy online, looking at pictures of Bologna's medieval architecture, learning basic Italian phrases, and planning what Emma would pack for their European adventure. Marcus called his sister in Oregon to tell her the news, and her reaction was a mixture of amazement and joy. "Marcus, do you realize what this means?" she said through tears of pride. "You're not just getting a better job. You're being recognized as one of the best in the world at what you do." On Monday morning, Marcus walked into the Ferrari facility with Emma's hand in his and a decision that would change their lives forever. Giuseppe Martinelli was waiting in Antonio's office, and both men stood when Marcus entered. "Mr. Martinelli." "Mr. Rossi," Marcus said formally, "Emma and I have discussed your offer, and we would be honored to accept." Martinelli's face broke into a genuine smile. "Excellent. I will begin making arrangements immediately. You will leave for Italy in 3 weeks, which gives us time to prepare Emma's school enrollment and secure appropriate housing for you both." As they discussed logistics and travel plans, Marcus caught sight of his reflection in Antonio's office window. The man looking back at him was still the same person who had been mocked by Richard Kellerman just 2 weeks earlier, but everything else had changed. He was no longer a struggling single father working on his old Honda in a parking lot. He was Marcus Thompson, soon-to-be member of Ferrari's elite diagnostic team, taking his daughter on the adventure of a lifetime. Sometimes, he thought, the universe has a sense of justice that operates in ways we never expect. 3 weeks later, Marcus and Emma stood in the departure lounge of San Francisco International Airport, their lives packed into 3 suitcases and a sense of adventure that neither had ever experienced before. Emma clutched her new travel backpack, filled with coloring books, her favorite stuffed elephant, and the Italian phrase book she had insisted on buying. The flight to Bologna, with a connection in Rome, was Emma's first time on an airplane, and her wonder at seeing the world from above infected Marcus with a renewed sense of possibility. As they flew over the Atlantic Ocean, Emma pressed her face to the window and asked questions about everything she saw below. "Daddy, when we get to Italy, will I be able to understand what people are saying?" "At first it might be difficult," Marcus admitted, "but children are amazing at learning languages. I bet you'll be speaking Italian before I learn more than a few words." Bologna's medieval cityscape was even more breathtaking in person than in the photographs they had studied. Their apartment, arranged by Ferrari, was in a historic building near the university, with windows that looked out onto narrow cobblestone streets and architecture that was older than their entire country. Emma's international school was a short walk away, housed in a renovated Renaissance palace with classrooms that seemed like something from a fairy tale. The other children were from families around the world, many of whom worked for various international companies with offices in the region. On Emma's first day of school, Marcus walked her to the imposing entrance, both of them nervous about this new chapter. "What if the other kids don't like me?" Emma asked, her usual confidence shaken by the magnitude of the change in their lives. "Emma, you're kind, smart, and curious about everything around you," Marcus said, kneeling down to her eye level. "Those are the qualities that make the best friends. Besides, many of these children are probably just as nervous as you are about being in a new place." He was right. Within a week, Emma had befriended children from Germany, Japan, Brazil, and Australia. Her teacher, Mrs. Patterson, a British woman who had been working at international schools for 15 years, was amazed at how quickly Emma adapted to the multicultural environment. Meanwhile, Marcus's training at Ferrari's Maranello facility was unlike anything he had ever imagined. The factory where Ferraris were born was a temple to automotive perfection, where every detail was crafted with obsessive attention to quality and performance. His instructor, Francesco Moretti, was a master technician who had worked on Formula One racing cars for 20 years before transitioning to the advanced diagnostic program. Francesco was initially skeptical of the American who had been fast-tracked into the program, but Marcus's abilities quickly earned his respect. "Most technicians learn to use diagnostic equipment to find problems," Francesco explained during Marcus's second week. "You seem to understand the problem first, then use the equipment to confirm your suspicions. This is the mark of true mechanical intuition." The other trainees in the program were seasoned professionals from Ferrari facilities around the world, technicians from Monaco, Germany, Japan, and Brazil who had years of experience with luxury automotive systems. Marcus was the only one who had come from outside the Ferrari network, and initially, Some of them questioned whether he belonged in such an elite program. Those doubts disappeared quickly. During a diagnostic exercise involving a prototype engine with multiple complex problems, Marcus identified issues that the others had missed entirely. His approach was different. Where others relied primarily on computerized diagnostics, Marcus combined technology with an almost supernatural ability to understand what the machine was trying to communicate. "How did you know the fuel injector timing was off by just 3 milliseconds?" asked Hans, a veteran technician from Ferrari's Munich facility. The diagnostic computer didn't even flag that as a problem. Marcus struggled to explain something that felt as natural as breathing. The engine's rhythm wasn't quite right. It was like listening to a symphony where one instrument is slightly out of tune. Most people wouldn't notice, but once you hear it, you can't unhear it. Francesco nodded approvingly. This is what we call mechanical empathy, the ability to understand machines not just as collections of parts, but as living systems with their own personalities. It cannot be taught, only recognized and developed. As the weeks passed, Marcus found himself not just learning Ferrari's advanced diagnostic techniques, but contributing to them. His unique approach to problem-solving led to several improvements in diagnostic procedures that Francesco documented for implementation across Ferrari's global network. The training program culminated in a final project that would determine whether trainees graduated to Ferrari's elite diagnostic team. Each trainee was given a Ferrari that had been deliberately sabotaged with multiple, interconnected problems that mimicked the kind of complex issues that stumped technicians worldwide. Marcus's assigned vehicle was a 8-12 superfast with what appeared to be random electrical failures, power loss issues, and mysterious vibrations. The other trainees tackled their projects methodically, using systematic diagnostic approaches that could take days to complete. Marcus spent the first hour simply sitting with the car, listening, observing, and letting his intuition guide him toward the source of the problems. To observers, it might have looked like he was doing nothing, but his mind was processing hundreds of subtle clues that most people would never notice. "The electrical problems are secondary," he told Francesco after his initial assessment. "There's a mechanical issue in the drivetrain that's causing vibrations, which are loosening electrical connections. Fix the mechanical problem, and the electrical issues will resolve themselves." His diagnosis was correct, and his repair was completed in half the time it took the other trainees. But more importantly, his approach demonstrated a level of diagnostic sophistication that impressed even the most experienced Ferrari engineers. Back in Bologna, Emma was thriving in ways that surprised both her father and her teachers. Her natural curiosity about different cultures had led her to become something of a bridge between the various international students. She was picking up Italian with remarkable speed, and her teachers noted that her exposure to different perspectives was accelerating her overall academic development. "Your daughter is exceptional," Mrs. Patterson told Marcus during a parent-teacher conference. "She has this wonderful ability to make connections between different subjects and cultures. I think this experience is going to shape her entire approach to learning in life." Emma's letters to her aunt in Oregon were filled with excitement about her new friends, the amazing food, and the weekend trips she and Marcus took to explore Italian cities. She was documenting everything in a journal that she planned to share with her class back home. "Daddy, I want to be able to come back to Italy someday," she told Marcus one evening as they walked through Bologna's historic center. "Maybe when I'm older, I could work for a company that lets me travel to different countries." Marcus realized that this experience was giving Emma something he had never had, a sense that the world was full of possibilities, that success wasn't limited by where you started or what others thought of you. The graduation ceremony for the advanced diagnostic program was held at Ferrari's headquarters, with executives from around the world in attendance. Marcus's project scores were not just the highest in his class, but among the highest in the program's history. Giuseppe Martinelli presented Marcus with his certification, but more importantly, with an offer that would secure both his and Emma's futures. "Mr. Thompson, Ferrari would like to offer you a position as a senior diagnostic specialist, based initially in our California facility, but with opportunities to work at any of our locations worldwide. This position comes with a significant salary increase, full benefits, and educational support for Emma through university." As Marcus accepted the offer, He thought about the parking lot encounter that had started this incredible journey. Richard Kellerman's cruel words had been meant to diminish and discourage, but instead they had set in motion events that transformed everything. After the ceremony, Marcus and Emma celebrated at a small restaurant in Bologna's old town, sharing gelato and planning their return to California. "Daddy, are you happy about going home?" Emma asked. Marcus looked at his daughter, now more confident and worldly than when they had arrived, and realized that home wasn't a place anymore. It was wherever they were together, building their future one opportunity at a time. "I'm happy about everything, sweetheart, but mostly I'm happy that you got to see how big the world is and how many amazing things are possible when you work hard and treat people with kindness." Emma smiled, her face still showing traces of gelato. "And when you're really, really good at listening to cars talk?" Marcus laughed, knowing that their adventure was just beginning. 6 months after returning from Italy, Marcus was settling into his new role as senior diagnostic specialist at Ferrari's California facility when an unexpected visitor appeared at the service center. Richard Kellerman stood in the customer lounge, looking considerably less confident than he had during their parking lot encounter almost a year earlier. Marcus was working in the diagnostic bay when Maria Santos approached him with an amused expression. "Marcus, we have an interesting situation. Do you remember Mr. Kellerman, the gentleman whose Ferrari broke down after your encounter in the parking lot?" Marcus looked up from the 488 Pista he was examining, wiping his hands on a clean shop towel. "Of course. Is his car having problems again?" "Not exactly," Maria said with a slight smile. "He's asking specifically to speak with you. Apparently he's been experiencing issues with his replacement Ferrari, and several other service centers haven't been able to diagnose the problem. Someone told him about your reputation." Marcus felt a complex mixture of emotions. Part of him was curious about what Richard wanted, while another part wondered if this was some kind of setup or attempt at further humiliation. But his professional ethics were clear. Every customer deserved the best service Ferrari could provide, regardless of their past behavior. "Send him back," Marcus said simply. Richard Kellerman entered the diagnostic bay looking distinctly uncomfortable. He was still well-dressed and obviously successful, but the arrogant confidence from their previous encounter was notably absent. He approached Marcus hesitantly, clearly struggling with how to begin the conversation. "Mr. Thompson," he started, then stopped, seeming to gather himself. "I owe you an apology. Several apologies, actually." Marcus continued working, giving Richard a chance to find his words without the pressure of direct eye contact. "When my Ferrari broke down that day after our encounter in the parking lot, I was furious. I blamed the car, the dealership, everyone except myself. But when I learned that you had actually identified the problem just by observation, and that you could have warned me," Richard's voice trailed off. "But you chose not to warn me, and I understand why. I was cruel to you, and you had no obligation to help someone who had treated you so poorly." Marcus set down his diagnostic tablet and turned to face Richard fully. "Mr. Kellerman, I considered saying something, but I decided that it wasn't my place to offer unsolicited advice to a stranger." Richard nodded, accepting the diplomatic response for what it was. "The reason I'm here is that my new Ferrari has been having intermittent problems for months. I've taken it to 3 different service centers and no one can figure out what's wrong. The problems only happen occasionally, and by the time I get the car to a technician, everything appears normal." This was exactly the kind of diagnostic challenge that Marcus had built his reputation on: intermittent problems that stumped conventional diagnostic approaches. "What kind of problems?" Marcus asked, his professional curiosity overriding any personal feelings about their history. "Power loss, but only under specific conditions. The engine seems fine during normal driving, but when I try to accelerate hard or take it on the track, something isn't right. The computer diagnostics show nothing unusual." Marcus walked over to Richard's Ferrari, a pristine 812 GTS in midnight blue. Even before opening the hood, he could sense something subtle in the way the car sat, something almost imperceptible about its stance. "How long has it been since you've driven it hard?" Marcus asked. "About a month. I was getting frustrated with the problems, so I've been babying it, hoping the issue would resolve itself." Marcus ran his hands along the engine bay, listening to the idle, feeling for vibrations that shouldn't be there. After several minutes of careful examination, He found what he was looking for. Mr. Kellerman, this isn't a mechanical problem in the traditional sense. Your car has been programmed with a conservative performance map, probably as a precautionary measure by one of the other service centers. They couldn't find the original problem, so they limited the engine's performance to prevent potential damage. Richard looked confused. But why wouldn't they tell me that? They probably forgot to mention it or assumed you knew. It's not an uncommon temporary solution when dealing with intermittent issues. The good news is that I can run a complete diagnostic protocol and restore your car's full performance capability. Over the next 2 hours, Marcus conducted the most thorough diagnostic examination Richard's Ferrari had ever received. His approach combined advanced computer diagnostics with his intuitive understanding of how high-performance engines should behave. The result was not just a solution to the immediate problem, but optimization improvements that made the car perform better than it ever had. The intermittent issues you were experiencing were caused by a combination of factors, Marcus explained as he completed the final system checks. A slightly dirty mass airflow sensor, combined with old spark plugs and a fuel filter that was starting to clog. None of these problems were severe enough to trigger obvious symptoms under normal driving conditions, but under high-performance demands, they created the power loss you experienced. Richard watched in amazement as Marcus explained each issue and the corrections he had made. The level of detail and understanding far exceeded anything he had encountered at other service centers. Mr. Thompson, I have to ask, how did you develop this level of expertise? I mean, no offense, but when I saw you working on your Honda that day, I never would have imagined. Marcus paused in his work, considering how to respond. Mr. Kellerman, that Honda you saw me fixing taught me just as much about engines as any Ferrari I work on now. Every car has something to teach you if you're willing to listen. My grandfather used to say that mechanical knowledge doesn't care about price tags or brand names. It only cares about understanding. The words hit Richard with unexpected force. He realized that his assumptions about success, worth, and capability had been fundamentally flawed. The man he had dismissed as a failure in a parking lot possessed skills and knowledge that Richard, for all his wealth and business success, could never match. Your daughter, Richard said suddenly, is she doing well? I remember she was with you that day. Marcus's face lit up with pride. Emma's doing wonderfully. She spent 3 months with me in Italy while I trained at Ferrari's headquarters. The experience changed both of our lives. She's learning Italian, excelling in school, and talks about maybe becoming an engineer someday. Richard felt a deep shame as he imagined the impact his cruel words might have had on a young child. Mr. Thompson, I want you to know that I learned something important from our encounter. My success in business had made me arrogant, and I was using my wealth to justify looking down on others. That day I was at my worst, and you maintained your dignity despite my behavior. Marcus finished the final diagnostic checks and handed Richard the completed service report. The Ferrari was purring with perfect mechanical harmony, every system optimized and performing at peak capability. Mr. Kellerman, we all have moments we're not proud of. What matters is what we learn from them and how we choose to act going forward. As Richard prepared to leave, he turned back to Marcus one final time. If you ever decide to start your own diagnostic consulting business, I'd like to be your first investor. What you do isn't just mechanical work, it's artistry. Marcus smiled politely but shook his head. I appreciate the offer, but I'm exactly where I want to be. Ferrari gave me and Emma opportunities I never dreamed possible. Loyalty matters to me. Richard nodded with respect and genuine admiration. Then Ferrari is lucky to have you. As Richard drove away in his perfectly tuned Ferrari, Marcus reflected on the strange journey that had brought them both to this moment. A year ago, he had been a struggling single father, dismissed and mocked by a successful businessman. Today, that same businessman sought his expertise and acknowledged his superior skills. Emma bounced into the service bay after school, as she did every day, her backpack full of homework and stories about her day. She had grown taller during their time in Italy, and carried herself with new confidence born from knowing that the world was full of possibilities. How was your day, Daddy? She asked, settling into the corner where Marcus kept a small desk for her to do homework while he finished work. Interesting, Marcus replied, thinking about Richard's visit and the lessons embedded in their strange relationship. I had a reminder today about how much people can change when they're willing to learn from their mistakes. Emma looked up from her math homework. Mrs. Rodriguez says that's called personal growth. She says it's one of the most important things humans can do. Marcus smiled at his daughter's wisdom. Mrs. Rodriguez is absolutely right. And speaking of growth, how would you feel about taking another trip to Italy this summer? Ferrari wants me to help train their new diagnostic specialists. Emma's face lit up with excitement. Can we visit our friends in Bologna? And maybe see Venice this time? Absolutely, Marcus said, realizing that their story wasn't ending, it was just beginning a new chapter. From a parking lot encounter that could have broken his spirit to an international career that exceeded his wildest dreams, the journey had taught him that true success wasn't about proving others wrong, but about staying true to yourself and never giving up on growth and possibility. Sometimes the people who try to diminish you end up being the very catalysts that propel you toward greatness. And sometimes redemption comes full circle in the most unexpected ways.